I'm a game developer, so in my time I've had to create a lot of game art and game UI. And even though I begrudgingly pay the $60 a month that it costs to have the entire Adobe Creative Cloud, I actually don't use Adobe Photoshop at all for creating my game art, but instead I use a free design software called Figma. Now, most artists who create game art are going to be using Photoshop, and they have to kind of painstakingly paint and sculpt their UI. And even something like a button can take upwards of 2 hours to complete. Now, Figma is a tool used by professional product designers to make UI and flows for things like websites, apps, and mobile apps, but it is not typically used for game art. And while Figma in a lot of ways is not nearly as advanced as Photoshop, I think you're going to be really surprised with how much we can do with less. Let's get started. I found that a lot of game art, half of the battle is just theory, and the tool is the other half. And it might even be more like 80-20. So if you can really understand the theory, you're already 70-80% of the way there. All right, so today we're going to be taking a look at this piece of UI. I want to have a series where I do a few of these, but for the first video, I just want to do this one, which is a simple piece of UI, something that you would see in a mobile game. So I gotta give a little disclaimer here. I found this on Pinterest. I could not find the original artist to credit this for, or else I would, but I thought this would be a really great example to go through on how you can take Figma's tools and kind of modify it for your own needs and for your own use cases. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is that, like, while yes, these are just buttons, but we have a lot of things going on here. We have some linear gradients, we have some glowy effects, we have some drop shadows, we have lots of layering, so it feels very 3D, it feels very tactile, which is very common in the mobile game space, especially for free mobile games, because people want you to be very, very engaged when you're looking at screens like this. We also have some highlights going on here. So it feels very bubbly, it feels very fun. So I'm going to teach you how you can actually take something like this and modify it for your own game and for your own design. So I'm just going to be copying this design just to show you how to do it, and then you can take the same principles and add them to your game. So I'm just going to set up a frame for me to work off of, and I'm just going to import a random photo into here just so that it has some kind of background, because we're really just going to be focusing on the UI and the buttons. So I just have kind of a random screenshot of one of my games. Then we're going to take a black overlay and turn it down to maybe 50%. So that way you can kind of see what we're going for here. Now I'm just going to move this over here so this isn't getting in the way, just so I can work off of it. Now let's start off with recreating the pop-up. So I'm just going to make a rectangle, and we're going to put it like right in the middle here. And then we can turn the border radius up pretty high. A good rule of thumb for anything in UI is rules of 8. So the border radius here is on 40. So 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. I know my 8s times tables incredibly well because of this profession. And one thing that I notice a lot about game UI in particular is that there's a lot of layers going on all the time, even for something really small. So we're gonna have like maybe 5 or 6 layers going on just right here on this initial spot. So let's get that right. So what I can do is create another rectangle that goes on top of this, and then I can take this now and I can make this like a light blue, like a really light, almost gray blue here. And then now, because this is 40 and this is also 40, it doesn't look quite right, so we have to bring this up a little bit. So we're gonna make this like 48 or something. If the border radius is still the same, it actually looks smaller. So if I have a rectangle over here and I make this border radius 40, but then I duplicate it and I bring this down, the border radius is still 40, but because it's smaller, it looks a lot more curved. And now looking at the original design, we can do a lot with the shadows here. So what we can do on this second rectangle right here is we can add a drop shadow. And just like this is fine, but we can even tweak the values a little bit if we want to. Maybe bring it up. Maybe make it a little bit more intense. Maybe do something like that. Using just like the straight up black drop shadow is gonna make it look like web UI, and you want it to look like game UI. So instead of making it black, we're gonna make it blue, like a deep blue here. And then we're gonna blur it out a lot. So we can actually take up the intensity pretty far, even to something like 75 if we want to. That's a little far. So maybe even like 60 on this deep blue color. I might even tone that down. You can kind of tweak it as you want to. Just like really blur that out. Then I actually like how it is just as it is. But if you want another effect, you can also add another drop shadow. So I want another drop shadow that is just slightly less intense than the one we just did. So I really like the blur effect, but I want something that kind of outlines that rectangle in the middle. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make this blue, but I'm not going to blur it out this time as much as the other one. And even just right there, you can tell that we have something that has a lot of depth that we can reuse. It looks like a mobile game. I think I am going to make this more curvy. Yeah, I'm gonna bump that up to 56. And sometimes, like between this and this, like the sides and the top is not gonna be quite right. So then we can just make sure that they are completely aligned. Like that. All right, done. No, I'm kidding. And then if we wanna make this look even more glossy and fun, what we can do is we can add some highlights. And how you do that in Figma is instead of painting it like how you would in Photoshop, you can just make like a little tiny ellipse here, and then you can rotate it. And then we can color this in white, and you could leave it just like that if you wanted to, but if you wanted to make it a little bit more believable, you can actually add another effect, and instead of a drop shadow, we can change this to a layer blur, and we can even adjust the amount of blur that we want that to have. So that's 0, and then we can have one that's like 2. And that looks pretty dang believable right there. And we could leave it as an ellipse, which I think I will. You can also take these values and you can move them around if you want something like a little bit more of an organic shape, you can do that. But I'm gonna leave it as is. I think it's fine. And that is the basis of our UI. And that's the basis of how we're gonna do this. Now let's tackle the close button. So we need to start with an ellipse. And it looks like it's gonna take up most of this corner. So I'm gonna do 64. Again, using the rule of 8s, 8 times 8 is 64. I don't know who did the math on it, but apparently it's something having to do with the golden ratio. I don't know. So let's just make sure it's in the right place, it's lined up with everything, and we're gonna do a very, very similar treatment here. So I'm gonna grab the value, we're gonna keep it blue. And then we're gonna add, I think we're gonna have to add 2 drop shadows here. Let's start with 1. We can move that down a little bit. And I think I'm also gonna change this to blue. Actually, black looks kind of better here. And it's weird because even though we took the exact same color from here, because of all of the context of the other gradients, it looks like it doesn't fit. So we'll fix that in a bit. But first, we can take this, and looking at our reference photo, we can see that we have this gradient thing going on, and we also have lots of shadows and other things going on. So it looks like we have a gradient going from top to bottom. We have a drop shadow around the icon. We might have some glowy effects going on, but we also have this kind of cool dark ring around just this one piece, kind of like the ring around your eye. So if we take all of those things combined and add all of those effects, even though we're using a very simple tool, this is going to end up looking almost identical. So if we take our gradient here, we do something like this, and we have a nice blue, nice kind of dark blue right here. And I'm just going to copy that for this next color and paste it. And then if we lighten it up just slightly, I think this might have to be a little bit darker here. We're starting to get that kind of glowy effect. I think we're actually going to need this significantly darker. Yeah, and we can even bring it down like this too, so it looks like it has more of a glow. And then what I think is really going to seal the deal here is adding a stroke on the inside, so a dark blue stroke. And just really, really thin here. Really, really thin. But we might even want to add like a little... Oh, I was gonna say that actually looks kind of cool, but no. Just adding a really thin stroke. It matches the top here. Maybe a little tiny bit darker. Do like 0.75. 0.75. And then we can kind of copy our ellipse from earlier. And then I'm just taking these tools up here. These are the alignment tools, so you can align them vertically and horizontally. So I'm just making sure that everything's right. We can take our little blurry ellipse from over here and add it over here as well. I might want to scale it down just a little bit. There we go, it's looking pretty convincing. Now what we can do that I think is going to make this a little bit more believable is add in the close icon. Now I have an icon pack full of like 30,000 icons, but there's lots of free icons out there. Most notably the Font Awesome icon set. So the one downside to having 30,000 icons, you can't find a damn thing. Alright, there we go. So now we have our icon. Maybe we make that 48. We can manipulate these a lot, so we can make this white. We can give it a stroke. Make it look just like really cute and bubbly. Now we can add a drop shadow. And we can add this really nice blue color to it. So we can make it blue and dark. We can blur it out if we want to, and we can not if we want to. We're probably gonna want this at like 50% or something like that. And we don't really want it too far away from our subject over here. So I'm gonna do something like this. I'm gonna like blur it up just a little bit. I'm gonna move it to the right, just ever so slightly. I feel like I like the inside, the outside needs a little bit of help still, I feel like. You can see how many just like layers and effects we're working with, and we're just like layering effects over each other all the way. But now on this inner circle, I can kind of add another effect. If we click on this background ellipse, we can add maybe a drop shadow, but instead of having it offset, we can set it off from the center and make it like a really nice dark blue and just blur it out. This just makes it a little bit more dimensional, a little bit more believable, a little bit more tactile, and that's the thing with like mobile game UI, is that it needs to feel like you want to press it, you know what I mean? With other types of game UI, it's not totally like that. Like if you look at like PC and console UI, it's a lot more low-key compared to this stuff. But for the mobile game UI, it's very jelly, it's very tactile, it's very like in your face, because people want you to click on things. Now that I see it with this background, I'm like, dang, I missed an opportunity to, to do this with my game, and I might have to double back and implement something like this because this is really cool. All right, and now time for the buttons. So let's do this again. So I'm gonna take a rectangle tool, and I think I'm gonna set this maybe something like this, and then I'm gonna do like a 64 because we want room for at least 3. So we're gonna have like play or like resume, quit, and maybe like quit to title or something, and then we want to have a couple other buttons down here for the settings. Or maybe even like they have in the other reference where it's like a whole bar. And the reason I'm doing a rectangle, even though we're gonna make it into a pill, is that you can take the rectangle and then you can just drag this border radius all the way down to this level. And you can also do, if you don't like all that, you can also make like the squircle treatment too. But we're gonna do the pill because I'm gonna model it after the source material. So we're gonna take kind of the button treatment we just did and we're gonna do it again. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna use it as a reference. So now, instead of doing like the gradient at an angle, we're gonna do it from top to bottom. So we're gonna take this. This is going to be our dark color, and then this one is going to be our lighter color. Then I'm gonna add that stroke. And isn't it weird how it still looks flat? Like, it still looks flat to me, and it's so trippy. We can just move another one of these over here. We can bring it down so it looks like it's very rounded. And while that does something, it doesn't do everything, right? And one thing you can do if you really want to make these buttons and this UI just look like it's glowing is you can add like another oval right down here. And we can take this value down here and we can just lighten it up a little bit, and we can actually warm it up a little bit too. So see how it's almost that green, right? So if we lighten it and then we warm it, what we can do here is we can add an effect to this, not drop shadow, but a layer blur. And then just blur this beyond oblivion. And look how cool that looks just as is. And when you zoom out, it looks really cool too. I think a couple more things that we need. I think this needs to be a little bit bigger, maybe like a 1.5 or 1.75, just so it looks more solid. I think we also need another drop shadow behind this button, just like the reference. Yeah. And I think the black looks good. We can also go with a dark blue too. We can blur it out if we want to. But I actually am liking the black here. And it really looks like it pops off the page. I think I am gonna bring this down maybe to 60. And now we kind of have our button template, right? I think I'm gonna bring this gradient, I think I'm gonna bring this up a little bit from over here. And I might darken this just ever so slightly, so we really get that good contrast. And then that means that I have to darken the stroke too to make it pop a little, just a little bit more. And even just doing tiny, tiny tweaks like that can make a huge difference. And now, once we go in to add the icons, this is really gonna sell it. Now we need a play icon. So now, I have this play button. And I can take away the stroke and I can fill it with whatever I want. And I'm gonna do white. And we're gonna do the same thing over here. So now I really need like a deep blue shadow to sell this. And even just that looks pretty good. But if we bring that drop shadow just a little bit closer and then we tint it a little bit, it's gonna make it look super, super real. And now we have like that deep blue, almost purpley. And that looks great. I think I might want to bring that in even a little bit more. And now we can go in with a font and we'll just say play. Now this is not a good font for this. We can do Roboto or something. Oh, I hate all of these. Oh yeah, I hate that. I wish you could copy effects for that's one thing that would make this a lot better, is the copying of the effects. Alright, so it may not be the best font, but it'll do for now. And then now all we have to do is do the exact same thing that we did over here. Now at first glance it looks like the drop shadow is not gonna work, but it's because it's so small. So if we bring this in really, really close and turn the blur way down, we can get a very similar effect going on here. Get that really nice shadow. But we don't have to be limited also to just whole integers when we do the blur effect. We can do like this. Now right now we're at 100% opacity, and you can see how just with a little tweaking, you can make this look really, really nice. And we can bring this down quite a bit. We may have to bring that down. Have a little tiny stroke right here. And we can also play around with these values too. And you can just tweak it, play around with it. But as a general rule, now that we have this stroke over here, it looks wrong that this one doesn't also have a stroke. Now we can do that. And it has a really nice glowy 3D, three-dimensional effect to it. I think we should bump this up a little. The nice thing about Figma too is you can multi-select, so if you have two things that are the same color, you can select them, and I think the stroke might be a little too dark. So here's about where we had it. So we can bring it down just a little bit so that it still has that definition, but it's not super stark. And now we can take this button formula and apply it to whatever we want to. So now if I select all of this, I can bring this down. And because this isn't even an image, this is a text, we can retype anything. So even if we have play and resume, now we can realign it. Actually. And we can easily get, you see how Figma has these little icons with how far the items are apart, so we can get pretty accurate pretty quickly with this too. And then maybe let's say we don't want to have this be the same color as the others. Maybe we want to have like the orange treatment that's in the design. So what we can do is we can select all of this, making sure not to select these other ones. And right over here it has selection colors. So what we can do is we can click on just this one, and I can take my mouse wheel. It'll stay the same value, but the color will change. So if we want to change this to orange, all we have to do is scroll on the mouse wheel until we're comfortable with this. So we literally have that stroke over here, and then we can copy and paste it. And then that's our new orange. And then with our linear values, we can do the same thing. So now I can come in here, take this to an orange that I'm comfortable with. That's pretty dark. This may not look very good, but we will tweak, do not worry. Take this. And that looks really ugly. Looks a lot more brown than orange, so let's fix that. We want this to be like a very glowy orange color and not brown. So we'll just raise those values all the way up till the cows come home. And then on this ellipse right here, we can make this, again, warming it up, going over to the yellow. And that's just gonna have like a beautiful yellow glow to it. But now we have to adjust all of these shadows too. So this can no longer be blue, it has to be almost like a red. And that's on color theory, baby. Move these up a little bit. And all of our little things have gotten out of place. So you can kind of see the benefit here. You create something one time and then you can very easily copy, paste, duplicate, and then tweak. And it comes together very, very quickly after you've set it up the first time. And then now we can kind of focus on that bottom bar thing that we have going on. So if I just create another square, I can bring this down, and I can also take the color from here, maybe make it a little bit lighter. And then now what we can do is we can add, instead of adding a drop shadow, we can add an inner shadow. And we can kind of adjust these and tweak these as we want to. Adjust our values a little bit here. And you can see that it looks like it's inset now. It looks like we will have to bring both of these up a little bit to account for this. And then now what they have in the reference is two fields. So we can take this again, we can just duplicate it, kind of bring it down a little bit. And we can keep the inner shadow, but it looks like they are bringing this value down quite a bit. And I want this to be like pretty equidistant, so we can set up how far apart we want these to be. And then we can click on both and just kind of drag them out. Make them look like they're about the same. If we want to, we can kind of come back and readjust. Sometimes when you stretch them out, the spacing gets a little funky. But there you go. And now because we have a lot of our other components, now we can come back over here. So I'm just going to copy paste this bad boy for us to use over here. And I'm going to make these both a little bit darker so there's a little bit more contrast. I'm going to kind of align these. And then now I should be able to go and find like a volume. Just center that a little bit. Tweak some of these values. And then now we can add drop shadows to these too. Make them look a bit more believable. Let's make him that dark blue again. It's casting kind of a weird shadow. It's okay though. Add another one of these. And then kind of rinse, wash, repeat with the text. Let's take this over here. We can bump this down quite a bit. Maybe like 18. We can call this sound, maybe music. And you could keep the same drop shadows. You could even make it a little bit darker, just to kind of match that background. Then I'm actually just going to copy all of this. We're going to move it over here. Then we're going to say sound. Now I need a music icon. Once again, we can turn the blur down a little bit, turn down the Y values, and we get this really nice, beautiful drop shadow. I think I have swapped these two, so let's just whoop right there. And there we go. There's a little crash course on how you can use Figma to design game UI. And you can see it's really, really cool. And a lot of it is just theory-based and adding lots of effects and layering and really taking a deep dive at your inspiration that you're using and just kind of trying to nail down and break apart how other artists are doing this. Even though this really isn't a tool for game UI, you can see that you can get pretty far with it. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed watching this. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them down below, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Cheers!